Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be a carry tier list for patch 7.35D. But before we get into the video, I just want to let you guys know that I'm doing replay reviews on stream every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitch, which is linked down below in the description. If you're a newer player or a player basically below 4K MMR and you want me to review one of your replays and give you advice, you can go to my Patreon down below in the description and sign up, or you can just go to my Twitch and subscribe there. Every supporter can request at least one replay every month, and I'll also be playing games with the community on those streams as well. So I hope to see you guys there, and with that out of the way, let's get back to the video. So I wasn't planning on making a tier list for any of the positions for this patch because I figured, 7.36 would come out with Crownfall, but it didn't. So who knows? We're going to be stuck with this patch for a little while now. Hopefully me making these tier lists, pushes the patch closer because that always seems to happen. As usual, I'm making these tier lists kind of based on all the statistics you see. You know what I mean? I mean, in the past, I've made tier lists more for like low MMR pubs, but I kind of decided that no one really cares. Like, they are not distinguishing in the comments or in general the difference between a regular tier list or just like a pub tier list. So I decided, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to do a tier list. It's basically based on pros, high level Dota, but it's always subjective anyway. So it's also for pubs. I'm kind of taking that into account a little bit too. And honestly, if we just jump into it, one of the biggest things is that like PA is one of those heroes that like, I think it's the quintessential, like, is this 2K MMR or is this pros? Because right now, I know I'm skipping way down on the line, but like, I think this hero at like, newbie tier or whatever, even below 3K MMR is just like this hero's S tier because you're going to win every game. But in like anything above 4K or whatever, this hero's crap. So whatever, I'm just going to make it for like the high end and I'll just talk about those heroes in general. But without getting on too long of a tangent talking about other heroes that aren't the S tier heroes, let's jump right into the S tier heroes. And the first one is actually Lifestealer. So I made a Lifestealer build a week or two ago. And the main reason why this hero is now in the meta is because, first of all the other farming items that most people buy got nerfed except for Radiance. So Radiance is now probably like the best farming item if you can buy it, if you're a hero that generally goes Radiance. And Armlet has been good for a long time, and this hero still buys Armlet. So the kind of build up for the hero is very good. And then S and Y has been buffed, which is an item this hero loves to buy. And then the new Ags, which is not like super new, but it's relatively new. And just all the things that it does, it allows you to be invulnerable, disarm people, and do damage while you have Radiance on and all this kind of stuff. It is kind of just insane what this hero can do. So all of that combined makes this carry really, really good. And I think also the fact that you don't really have to be like this ultra carry, because you're going to have like mid and 4 position and off lane carries these days. Like, there's just so much farm on the map that you don't really have to be like as insane as you used to be. You can just stick on targets, you can just run in, you can ult in. There's so many different things you can do, and you don't have to be the main source of damage. Because I think in the past, when this hero as a carry was just like, okay, this is your only carry, everyone else is doing magic damage, no one else is getting farm, it just felt underwhelming at times. I mean, yes, a few years ago, before they changed up how the hero worked, then it was very good. But since they kind of changed it around, it hasn't been that great until this patch. And so it's mainly the build, the Radiance, the Ags, all that kind of stuff, and also just the meta in general shifting, where this hero's been getting small tweaks, small buffs, and a lot of the other carries that have been good for a long time have been getting nerfs. So that's Lifestealer. That's the main reason that he's very good right now. And then there's Luna. Luna is also just one of these heroes that has been changed here and there. I think like a couple years ago, this hero was really good. It was like this hero and Medusa that were really, really good. And then this hero got nerfed. They basically changed the shard to no longer be a right click on your Lucent Beam, and they kind of changed the shard and that kind of stuff a little bit. And now this hero, the shard is actually good in a different way. It's not the same kind of playstyle, but it's still pretty good. And this hero just farms so quickly. It's actually one of the timing based heroes where like you are going to get your farm, and it's just, you're going to come out of the jungle at 20-25 minutes or whatever, and you're just going to have like 3 or 4 items, and it's going to be insane, and there's almost nothing that the enemy can do to stop you from doing that. And then you add that shard, which gives you a little bit of everything you want. I mean, this Moonglaves can be activated and it gives you damage around you, but then you also just don't take as much damage, which is kind of insane. It just gives you that extra buff that you would need. And if you're buying, Butterfly, you're buying Satanic, you're buying BKB maybe, like you're buying these things that make you survivable anyway, and then you have this shard. Like, it's ridiculous. Plus, you can scale into the late game with Ags and with all those talents that make the Ags even better and the beams and all that stuff better late game. And then it's like the one hero, I think, in the patch that really helps you push high ground. That's another thing too, is like all these little things have kind of just added up. Same thing with Lifestealer and now with Luna to just make this hero so good, because high ground is so hard to push. But if you can push it, with this hero, you are going to just delete buildings because of the glaives and the bounces. So if you get an opportunity to actually hit the buildings, it's just, they're going to be gone. Where if you don't have a carry that does that, like even like a Slark or like an Ursa or some of these other heroes that they do damage to buildings, kind of, I guess, but not really, then it just feels impossible to go high ground. But Luna kind of solves that a lot. And so that's also why this hero is really good. Just kind of every little thing is just compounded to make her very, very good this patch. Probably my favorite carry this patch, actually, because I just feel like it's so reliable. And then lastly, we have Morphling. I don't love Morphling. I kind of hate when Morphling is good. It's just not a hero I play pretty much ever. I'm just not a Morphling player, but it is very good. I mean, it's getting picked all the time in pro games. It's one of the most popular heroes. I mean, all these three heroes are the most picked heroes on Dota 2 Pro Tracker, and that's just kind of is what it is. I think in the past, you know, there was the Morphling build where you stole other people's stats, and they got rid of that and they changed the Ags, and so that's not really the build anymore. But then because all these different items have kind of been introduced with Conda and all this kind of stuff, it's not that you're going to go that every single game. I mean, people are going for the Vlads and the Conda build and all that kind of stuff, and that's definitely an option, but you don't have to. And I think that's why the pros are picking it so much more now, is because there are a variety of options. There's so many things to do. You can, you know, use that to your advantage to just delete people, and that's completely viable, and it's definitely very good. You definitely see pro players doing that in pubs and in even pro games. But then you also can just go back to your typical right click ability, where you just get, you know, your standard right click items, your mantas, your Lincolns, your satanics, your, you know, everything like that, butterflies, your Scotties, all that kind of stuff is just still viable. And so I think that's what makes this hero very hard to deal with and very good in the high MMRs. But then if you are just like a regular pub player, this is the quintessential, you know, along with Tinker or like Brood or something, the quintessential like Smurf hero. So if you can actually perfect this hero, get really good at it, you are going to be able to stomp. And that's probably always the case. Like, even if this hero's not good in the meta, you can still stomp with it. Like, it's still always getting played by Smurfs and stuff like that. So I think that's just always the case. But then when the pros are picking it, you know, it's just really, really good. So I would just kind of hesitate, though, if you are new and you are picking Morphling, to like go that kind of cheesier build, because it is a little bit risky, and I've seen people do it that aren't that good at Morph and think they're just going to get easy wins and delete people, and that doesn't always work, so just be careful with that. So that's S tier. These are just the best heroes right now, and I put them one step ahead of the A tier. And you see there's not too many heroes in S or A tier, and I think it's because these heroes are all basically the best heroes right now. It's just that the one set, you know, these three are just more picked, they're higher win rate, they're just better overall than these heroes. And the first one that we're going to look at is Faceless Void, because this hero just was the best carry forever, and it's just been getting slight nerfs, and other carries have been getting slight buffs, where it's finally just kind of come down from the top of its mountain pretty much for the last like 6 months or so. And honestly, you could even debate and say that it still might be S tier in some ways, because it still is very good. But I think in a lot of cases, people are kind of bored of the hero. They're not picking it as much since it's not as good. And the win rate has dropped off a bit, but it still does all the things that it did before. It's still almost just as strong. It's just that things have slightly changed with the meta, but still, like, I don't really think I need to spend too much time on Faceless Void. You know what this hero does, and it just does all those same things that it did before. It just, Maelstrom's gotten nerfed. Like, it's gotten some small nerfs here and there, so that's just kind of bringing it down a peg to where it probably should be, where it's not getting picked every single game. So that's Faceless Void. And then Slark, I actually have Slark up here still, because I think Slark is just still a really, really good pub hero. I think in the Elite League, it was only picked like 5 times. And it went like 1 in 4, so that's really not good, but it's still getting picked. Like, it's a top, you know, 5 or 6 hero getting picked as a carry in like high MMR immortal pubs. And I still think like the lower in MMR you go, if this hero is viable, which it is, it's going to be even better. And so that's why I still think it's up here, because anything below immortal, like this hero can just absolutely wreak havoc in games. And it's still getting nerfed like here and there because it is so good. I think finally you could probably make an argument that this hero is B tier, but I just think all of these heroes, I would rather have a Slark on my team. I would rather pick Slark personally because I just like the hero, but I also think it is stronger than a lot of these other, you know, heroes in the B tier, just a slight rung above because it's of all the things that offers in the game. And if you do get a lot of farmless hero, which is pretty guaranteed, you can just absolutely stomp games. I think the one thing is obviously going high ground is kind of hard on the hero, but regardless, I don't think you have to worry about that too much. I think if it gets nerfs, more in the future, or if other things keep getting buffed and it doesn't really get touched, then it's going to drop from A, but right now it's still pretty good. We'll see if in the next patch, if it ends up, finally falling off. It's kind of one of those that Slark has been up here with Faceless Void. Faceless Void has been better than Slark, but Slark's been right there at A tier for, it feels like, a year, which honestly I like because I love Slark, but also it felt like there was like 5+ years that Slark was not viable. So it's kind of cool that this hero is at this good place where it's a decent hero, but it's not completely broken. I like that. And then Anti-Mage is up here because people have just been picking it way more. This hero's been getting small buffs here and there with the Maelstrom nerf and other things like that. This, Battle Fury builders. Battle Fury is still pretty good. It's gotten a little bit better in that way. I also just think the people figuring out the map, that the map just has infinite farm and like people are just going to stall out the game. You can't just go high ground so early. Anti-Mage just becomes way better because now you just are almost always guaranteed to get your 3rd and 4th and 5th item when you start getting out of control for the enemy, and it's very hard for them to deal with you. And then the other main thing that this hero does now is people have realized that the Agnum's build, the Agnum Scepter build, is very, very good because now you can buy that. Like, you're always going to get Battle Fury, probably Manta. You can even maybe skip the Manta and get the Ags, but it's usually Battle Fury, Manta, and then Ags. And Ags is just so good because you just annoy the shit out of supports. Like, you just send your illusion in and the supports just have to deal with it or run away. That's really annoying. You can also bait tons of spells, especially if they don't know you have an Ags yet. And even if you, like, they know that you have an Ags, it's still very annoying to deal with. Like, having someone get that blink in, initiate on you, and then you just get a ton of mana burnt. And also it's like if you're going high ground or something else like that, you can just start off a fight or initiate or scout with those illusions. So there's just so many different things you can do to just annoy the enemy. Or if you're like blinking away and they're chasing you, you can send an illusion in to, cancel blinks and all that kind of stuff. There's just so many different things. It kind of ups the skill cap on the hero even more to just make it more annoying, which this hero's already kind of annoying to deal with, and it just makes that even worse. So it's almost like PL in a way now, because PL actually obviously has the Ags as well, and it's hard to deal with, and has a bunch of illusions, and can kind of spam the Q, and it's just very annoying because he just does it from range. Now Anti-Mage kind of does that same exact thing. So that's really why this hero's up there now. And then that's the A tier. We can move on to the B tier. All of these heroes, I think, are just a rung below these S and A tier heroes. I mean, honestly, I think you could kind of switch these heroes in and out depending on MMR, depending on your playstyle, that kind of thing. But I think all these B tier heroes are just a rung below. And so we have Ursa here. I personally like the hero. I think the hero's still pretty good. There's kind of different builds with the hero. You can kind of go for that infinite unkillable build where you just have your ult off cooldown like every 2 seconds. It feels like you have your Earth Shock that gives you kind of a mini ult there when you go Octarine and all this kind of stuff. And you can honestly afford to do that in a lot of games, and you don't even have to buy BKB, and you can just destroy people with that build. But you can also go for, your typical build as well if you need to. And so that's why I think this hero is pretty good. But it does have the added problem of going high ground is always going to be hard when you have an Ursa carry. So you probably want some other heroes on your team that can still push high ground, because high ground's already so hard that if your carry can't push high ground, it just makes the game infinitely harder. Like, you can just keep the enemy in the base forever, but it just feels like, you could just have 25 minutes out on the map still farming and getting Roche and all this stuff, but you just can't push because Ursa doesn't do anything to buildings. That's kind of the one problem with the hero, I think. Then we have Monkey King. Monkey King is kind of an odd one because the win rate in like total pubs says it's pretty bad actually, but the win rate and the pick rate for pro pubs is actually pretty good. And I personally, in my games, I've seen it stomp and absolutely destroy. And I think it is pretty good right now. Overall, I think it just has multiple different builds. You can go for Maelstrom, you can go for Diffusal Blade, you can go for maybe not Battle Fury, but you can go for Ags, you can go for all this different stuff. And I think that's one thing, like along with Morph, where there's so many different ways that you can adjust for the matchups that it allows this hero to be pretty good and probably better at higher levels, because that's the thing. If you're looking for a cookie cutter hero where you just need cookie cutter builds at low MMR or just like some regular reliable carry, Monkey King might not be it, because there's so many different things you can go. Like I said, even Echo Saber is another one. There's a lot of early game items you can go. You can shift things up depending on matchups, like I said, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult, but the skill ceiling's higher. Also with like jumping in, jumping out, when to use ult, all this kind of stuff, positioning. It's a lane dominator, but it also has kind of like squishy aspects where you're not building a lot of HP items all the time, and then you can just die very quickly and those kinds of things. But then you can absolutely destroy on games as well. So I think it's very good, but it's just not the best of the best. It's not as reliable. And then we have Troll. So I honestly think that Troll could be A tier, but I don't want to put him A tier because I still don't love the hero. Like, this is obviously a personal opinion thing. He's getting picked a good amount, but he's still not one of these like standard heroes that gets picked in pro games like a ton. Like, I think he's picked a little bit now, but it's just not like insane. He still doesn't have an insane pick rate at high MMR, but people are picking him. He is definitely viable. He is pretty good right now, but the problem is it's just he has kind of all-in matchups. And in other words, like some games, Troll feels literally so good that you cannot lose because nobody can do anything to you. You just press BKB and ult and you just win the game, and it's like there's nothing the enemy does. Like, they just have horrible matchups. It's kind of like a Huskar in that way. But then other games, it just feels like you literally can't do anything. They just use, they just have infinite escapes, infinite ways to deal with you, and there's, you press alt and you just instantly run in and die, and there's all this kiting mechanisms and all that kind of stuff, and it just sucks to play Troll. And so that's why I always say this hero is never going to be up here until they change the alt or they change something about the hero to make it like you can actually control yourself. Because clicking a button and then not being able to control your hero for like 30 seconds or 20 seconds, whatever it is, it's just, that's never going to be viable at the highest levels. It's like puts a high cap on the hero where it just, there's a ceiling on the hero that it can never get better than where it is at a certain point. And I think now is that point. Like, unless they buff the hero to an insane degree where the statistics on it, like the raw numbers like damage or whatever are just so insane, then maybe it can get very good, but I don't think they're going to do that. I just think there's like a cap on the hero where unless they make it insane for some other reason, it's just not going to ever be this top echelon of hero till they change that. And then next we have Marcy. So Marcy's actually up here, which it's kind of interesting because this hero is getting picked a little bit. It has a decent win rate in high MMR pubs, but I actually think I've seen it more and more. It's kind of on the upswing in terms of popularity, and I've seen it in my games more and more as well, and it's actually kind of insane. Like, this hero has always done the same stuff that it's done, but I think where before people were playing it as a support, they kind of thought of it as a support. They knew it could be a core potentially, but people didn't really play it as a core as much. It was just all support all the time when it first came out and it was broken. And now people are realizing, well, actually, this kit really is designed more to be a carry. That's what I think they even wanted it to be when they made it. And so now people are playing it and being like, oh yeah, well, actually, you can just own games with this hero. Like, the fact that the jump is the stun doesn't matter as much. It's like worse for support and all these kinds of things. The lane is not nearly as good, but that doesn't really matter when you're not relying on being aggressive early, or the jump stun is more just mobility, and if you get the stun, that's a little bit of an extra bonus. And you don't really need any items other than Battle Fury to farm and then BKB, and you just do insane damage, and then everything else from there is just like bonus. And that's kind of like Ursa in a way. It's just almost like a better version of Ursa in some scenarios, and then worse in some others, obviously, but still, it's just, this hero can feel absolutely domination in some games. Like, it just destroys people, it just deletes heroes. It just feels like, okay, well, I'm this tanky hero, I'm some other carry, I'm a mid or whatever, and then a Marcy stuns me, someone else stuns me on the team, and I just die in literally one ult. Like, one volley of hits and you're just deleted. Like, it literally feels like that, and it just can be very, very powerful right now. We will see where it ends up when, the next patch comes, if there's some buffs to this hero, if there's some item changes or things like that, but I definitely think it's on the upswing. Look for this hero to kind of come back into the meta sometime soon. And then we have Drow Ranger, who is a ranged hero that's pretty good and has been getting buffs recently, like changing of the shard to actually make it pretty good. And also, I think just with the changing of the meta, with a lot of these mobility heroes being nerfed, like Puck, and like the spirits, like Ember Spirit's not as popular as it once was, Storm's not as popular. A lot of these mobility heroes, even like, Faceless Void's not as good, Slark is getting nerfed, like, yes, Anti-Mage is good, but still, like, Lifestealer, Luna, like we even see here, Medusa, Gyro. These are heroes that are not going to get on top of Drow, and I think that's just one of those things where people are even picking more farm-heavy mids and all that kind of stuff. So Drow's really good in those situations when people can't jump on top of her. She has some good mobility because she, as long as she can hit, she can just delete the enemy and is really, really good at that. And also, with this high ground advantage, with a Drow on your team, it just makes that high ground so much harder for the enemy. She can clear waves really well. And if she can stand back and hit and you don't have that much mobility to jump her, it's just going to be even harder to push high ground like it's been the whole patch, but she's one of those heroes that really makes it difficult. And then Weaver is a hero that's another one that's kind of on the upswing, like I would say Marcy is. He's just kind of always been sitting there in the middle of the pack. He was a little bit popular a few patches ago. People kind of, when there was some new items and stuff, people wanted to try him out, you know, with the new Maelstrom and things like that. But I think this hero's been getting some buffs here and there with Geminate attack and stuff like that. So it's just on the upswing, getting more popular. I think if you want like a mobility hero, if you're sick of playing Slark or Anti-Mage or Faceless Void, this hero is really good in kind of that role, but also with the ranged element instead of being a melee hero. So I think it's just on the upswing, and there's not really too much to say about the hero. The hero does what it does, but it's just pretty good right now. I think the one problem that it deals with is obviously Slardar is very, very popular, and so having Slardar on the enemy team can feel very bad as a Weaver. But otherwise, this hero I think is generally decent. Just kind of middle of the road, but still very good. Then the next two heroes are Gyro and Medusa. And I kind of grouped them together a little bit because they sort of play similar styles. Like they, as a carry, they kind of just farm a lot of stacks. They are just very reliable, almost like a discount Luna in the sense that they're just going to get their farm. They're going to clear through the jungle. They're going to come out of the jungle at like 20-25 minutes with insane amount of farm. There's not really much you can do. I've even seen people play Gyro and Medusa mid recently, maybe Medusa even more, and they're just kind of on the upswing with a lot of these other heroes getting nerfed. And so because of that, it just feels super reliable, and late game you can buy like Divine and other things like that. Now there are matchup dependent things where like Gyro's a pretty short ranged hero. Medusa, if there's like an anti-mage or some other diffusal builder, which is not as popular anymore. In some ways, diffusal's been just not as good. Like, you know, everyone was rushing diffusal for the longest time. Now they're not as much because dispersor's been nerfed. So you still have to watch out for that. But if it's a game where no one can really buy that, Pango's been nerfed a little bit, even though people are picking it a lot still. You know, Medusa is a very good hero in that game and can just absolutely stomp. So just look out for that. Keep your eye out on that. These are two very reliable heroes. And then the last two here for B tier are just Arc Warden and Meepo. These are just cheese picks. If you're a good Arc Warden player, it's pretty good right now. Middle of the pack. I think it's decent. They've just been changing it up. It was really good at one point and they nerfed a little bit, but now it's just kind of middle of the road. And same thing with Meepo. Meepo was really, really good. I still think it's pretty good. It's just that you don't really see much Meepo because there's not that many Meepo players. It's not broken by any means, but it's still great. It's still kind of crazy when you have the dig and the Mega Meepo and all that kind of stuff. So if you can play it, it's still decent. So that's B tier. Next, we're going to move on to C tier. All these heroes are, you know, semi-viable. It's just they're not great. Bloodseeker I've seen sometimes. I've seen him own games, but then I've also seen him just be completely useless. And so there's nothing crazy new about the hero. There's nothing different. I think, if anything, it's still kind of trying to find its way. I think it might take a patch with some buffs and then it might actually shoot up to, you know, A tier, S tier, who knows. But just sitting there at that weird, awkward position where sometimes it can feel good, sometimes it can feel terrible. And that's kind of with Jug. Jug is just average right now. I think if you're looking for just a hero that you can play that is just like middle of the road, average hero, good at like 2k MMR, learning carry. If anything, I'd rather, you know, you pick Ursa or Luna, obviously, something more stable. Lifestealer even, maybe. Jug just feels like a worse version of a lot of these heroes, like kind of gets farm, but then are you building Battle Fury? Are you building Maelstrom? The build is very weird. It's just kind of awkward in this stage right now, and the ult just feels really, really bad with just how much people are farming, and everybody has, you know, Ghost Scepters or Glimmer Capes or these kinds of things that just make your ult feel useless, and then it's really hard to play this hero. Because if you're not getting kills with your ult and you're just relying on your right click, that's definitely something you can do, but it's not like, it just makes the hero not viable, because why would you do that? You would just rather pick some other hero, you know, if you're only going to be right clicking. And then Spectre is definitely viable, I think. You know, this hero with the new ult in the last 6 months or a year, whenever they changed that, it's pretty good. It gets picked a decent amount and it does win games, but it's just not picked all that much, and it has very bad matchups against some heroes that have break, like Viper, which isn't super popular right now, but Hoodwink is, and this hero just gets absolutely destroyed by Hoodwink because obviously there's a break with that ult and it lasts a decent amount of time and you get slowed and you can get stunned in the trees and all that kind of stuff. So I just think that this hero has some bad matchups and that's why it's not as good. It also just needs a reliable lane. It just does nothing in the laning stage unless you're obviously really good at the hero. Yes, you can stomp with it sometimes, but that's usually not going to happen. And then Wraith King, this hero is kind of more of an offlane, I'd say, almost these days, because it just farms really quickly. It does push towers very well, but I don't love seeing a Wraith King as a carry. It just feels like I'd rather it be an offlane, honestly, because if I'm relying on this hero to, you know, run in, stun, and delete people, it can do that sometimes, but then sometimes it feels like this hero does literally 0 damage. And it's like, what build are you going? Are you going for the right-click build? You're going for the Radiance build? You're going for an Ags build? Well, not as a carry, you're not going to buy Ags. You know, that's why it's a little bit awkward, because some of the strengths of the hero aren't really utilized from this, like, straight farming carry position. And then Alk, very greedy. I'd almost rather see Alk like mid or something like that, but you can actually play this hero still. It's one of the rare times in the recent, you know, patches, I think ever since they changed to Greevil's Greed and gave him another passive, where it doesn't feel like he's F or S tier. It feels like he's actually kind of middle of the road now. You can definitely pick the hero. You can have some success on him, but he's not going to stomp games all the time, and sometimes he can fall off and just feel useless. Sniper, more of like a mid these days, but it's definitely viable as a carry. It would really depend on the matchup. I think especially the lower MMR, you can get away with this as a carry and just like do the whole defending high ground, coming back in games even if you're losing things. So that's why I kind of put it here. It's definitely viable, but there's nothing super special about it. I probably wouldn't go for like the weird Ags and like the Conda build on this hero as a carry, obviously. But I honestly think that build is a little bit overrated anyway. So I'd go mainly right-click items, whether it was mid or carry anyway, so because of that, I think it's still definitely a viable carry. And then we have Clinks. Clinks has kind of moved his way from the F tier. He was sort of just like non-viable, and now people are realizing this hero is actually pretty decent still, despite some nerfs. It's kind of like had the techies treatment, where techies just got nerfed into oblivion, people stopped picking it, and then they kind of realized, wait, this hero actually is still pretty good. It's maybe not broken like it was, but it's decent. So I think this hero can be played as a carry, especially because people are realizing Orchid is still pretty good, especially because it builds into Bloodthorn, and Bloodthorn is still pretty good, and so they're getting in a lot of different heroes, and so getting this first item on this hero can be viable. It just feels a little bit awkward when you have this hero as your carry. You'd probably rather have it almost as another position, like the 4 position, because now we have carry 4 positions, and this is a perfect hero to play that. So it's viable, but it's just better maybe in other roles. Same thing with Wind Ranger. You'd rather have like a mid or a 4 position or even an offlane Wind Ranger rather than a carry, but you can pick it depending on, you know, your team. Maybe your lineup already has a carry mid and even like a carry offlane, or like these other heroes that are really greedy or whatever, and you just need this kind of single target hero that is just going to probably win your lane and can gank or whatever. You're not just going to straight farm like a lot of these other heroes, because you have farmers on your team. All you really need to do is run around killing people, and you just need to kind of single target somebody and kill them. You can definitely get away with Wind Ranger carry, but it is kind of, like I said, matchup dependent. And then we have the 2 illusion heroes. I put Phantom Lancer and Naga Siren here. They're both decent, but not very good. I'd say PL is probably the one that has more potential in terms of, if it's a good PL game, you can absolutely stomp the game if you know what you're doing, kind of like Morph in the way. Like if you're a good PL player, if you're a good Morph player, you can absolutely destroy the game, kind of like Arc Warden as well. Like it's almost like a cheese pick in that way. But if you're not as good at the hero, you're not a specialist, and it's a bad matchup, like it can feel absolutely useless, especially because I think for the first 20 minutes of the game, you are one of those heroes that you don't farm all that fast. You're going Ags first. It just feels a little bit awkward. And if they do find you, they're killing you. It just feels like that a lot of times. Whenever I see a PL on the enemy team, I almost feel like they're going to get hunted down and killed. And then Naga's decent, but I just don't think this hero scales like as well as other, you know, patches other times. It takes up a lot of farm. It is kind of difficult to play in some ways, maybe not as difficult as people usually thought, but still I think, you know, with all this other farm on the map for all the other heroes, I don't really love the way Naga plays. And then, like I said, in sometimes with PL or with Naga, you can just get in matchups where it feels absolutely useless. And so I don't really see it very much. People don't love playing it. It'd probably be better to pick one of these other fast farming heroes anyway than the Naga. And then lastly, we have D tier. These heroes can be picked, but you're probably not going to win very much. We have PA. This is really only a hero picked in low MMRs. Like you can still do well in some games if you have good matchups and if the enemy has no idea what they're doing, because yeah, you can scale really well into the late game, but with all the breaks and all the different stuff to deal with this hero, it just doesn't feel as good. And then Sven has actually been good recently. Like people have picked him in pro games and pro metas, but actually it's one of the lowest win rate heroes in the game right now, and it just has an abysmal win rate. I just don't love it in general for pubs. Like I think it's decent in some ways, and the pros obviously capitalize on what it's good at, but it's fallen off since it was like more popular in like A or B tier in probably the last patch or whenever, and I just hate this hero in pub. So this hero is one of those where I just would, like, you'd just rather have Gyro, you'd rather have Medusa, you'd rather have Luna, you'd rather have, like, any of these heroes that are farming quickly than a Sven, I feel like, because this hero is just going to get kited more than any other hero. That's kind of the same thing with PA in a lot of ways. Obviously, you have a blink with this hero. Yes, you can buy a blink, you can buy Ags and Shard and all that kind of stuff, but it just doesn't feel great on the hero and doesn't feel like it scales as well. You'd probably rather have other heroes. Then we have Ricky. You can definitely pick this hero and win. It's just that this hero does not farm. You're going to find Diffusal every game, like just guaranteed, and then the only way you farm is by buying an Ags, and that just takes forever to farm unless you're snowballing and farming heroes. So unless it's a low MMR game and you're just going to like smurf stomp people and just run around the map and kill, then it's just not good because it doesn't farm. And all these heroes farm, like you have to be able to farm in this meta. And then we have Terrorblade. Terrorblade is just the worst one of the illusion heroes, and this hero was only popular because it was being played as support, but then they nerfed it a little bit on the reflection, and it just took away the landing stage, it took away its power, and it being this weird save hero only, like later, it just felt awkward. Like, you're not really going to transition this hero into a carry like you could for other heroes that are viable supports, but then also can kind of go these carry builds, like a Clinks or like, you know, Hoodwink or anything like that. Or like even a Muerta, which is probably even still decent as a support, even though it's been nerfed, but as a carry, it just doesn't feel very good right now at all. Like, you're just getting kited more. People understand what the ult does. I think, honestly, one of the biggest things that this hero had going for it when it was, like, really strong was, yes, the numbers were all good, and the meta definitely fit this hero, but it also was just, like, people didn't understand what happened. Like, you would click alt and people would just panic and not know what to do, and you just delete them. You can still do that, but people are way better at dealing with it. People understand how to counter it and how to run away, and then you just click your alt, and then if your alt's not up, you don't do anything, and that's the problem with it, I think. Then TA just, I mean, it farms quickly, but now with all these other farming heroes in the game, and that's just kind of what it does, this hero falls off really quickly. So, you know, you're keeping pace with these other heroes pretty much every time, these other farmers, you know, Luna and stuff like that, maybe even farming quicker than you, and yet you fall off way sooner than they do. So that just really doesn't feel good. Then Shadow Fiend's like barely even a carry. I mean, I guess you could pick it, and it does work in some situations, in some matchups where you have like the right other cores to match with him, but it just doesn't feel great. Lena as well, pretty much more of a mid right now. You can play it carry, but I don't love it. Razor just, again, it's kind of all similar with these matchups, is like if you have the right mid and offlane heroes to pair this hero with, and you can just like carry from the carry position and don't have to just straight up farm, you can just get a few items and that's all you need, that'll work, but I don't love it as a carry, just better as other positions. Then Chaos Knight, same thing, better as an off lane or another position. Carry just doesn't feel great right now. To just have a CK, if you do have to rely on this hero, you're just not going to feel good like late game, because all these other heroes are going to outscale you and outfarm you. And then Bristleback, again, it's just here because people were picking it in the last 6 months or so, but it's just kind of fallen off completely. It's not really a viable carry anymore. And then lastly, we have F tier. These heroes are just not viable. Lone Druid has been nerfed into the ground. Even though it's a cheese pick, do not pick it. It just is absolutely terrible right now. Pudge is an awful carry, I think. I mean, technically it's kind of like these guys where you can pick it carry, maybe, but just pick it another, you know, position. It's better at every other position. Carries its worst position, I think, maybe 5, but it's probably even worse carry than it is a 5. This hero, being a support, it's not a carry anymore. It hasn't been for a while. Neither has Dawnbreaker, even though it's kind of semi-viable in like theoretical way. It's just really bad as a carry. And then Tiny, not a carry. It just hasn't been a carry for so long. If anything, I can maybe remove Tiny from the list because it's been, you know, 2+ years since this hero's been a carry. I just have it here because I love this hero as a carry. Like, the concept, it just feels so cool when you just like 3-shot buildings. Like, I loved when that was a thing, but that's just not a thing anymore. It hasn't been a thing. I'm just keeping it here because I hope it comes back one day, because that'll be kind of cool. Because I do like playing it, even though if it's a little cheesy and annoying. So that is my carry tier list for patch 7.35D. As always, guys, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about the video, if you agree or disagree. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.